In just over 2 weeks' time, Wales will elect 4 members to the European Parliament. But what do they have to say for themselves, and how will they represent us when they get there? Stay with us to find out. Welcome to Sunday Politics Wales. Bore da, and welcome to this special edition of Sunday Politics Wales ahead of the European elections on May the 23rd. Now, it's got to be the strangest election in modern times. Nobody expected it. Many people don't want it, but here we are nearly 3 years after voting to leave the European Union, preparing to elect members to the European Parliament. Well, we've gone all out today. The principal candidates from all the 8 political parties who are looking for your vote. But Wales only elects 4 MEPs. So let's meet the candidates. Joining me here are Sam Bennett from the Liberal Democrats, Dan Boucher for the Conservatives, John Owen-Jones from Change UK, Anthony Slaughter from the Green Party, Jill Evans from Plaid Cymru, Nathan Gill for the Brexit Party, Kris Hicks for UKIP, and Jackie Jones for Labour. A warm welcome to you all. I guess we'll start with you, Dan Boucher, as the Conservative candidate here, the party of government. Are you embarrassed at all that these elections are taking place? How much of a failure is it of the Conservative Party that you're here as candidates?
Well, I think it's a failure of Parliament. Parliament has the responsibility of honouring the referendum. It was a very clear result, and our ticket in this election is that we are standing to deliver Brexit. Obviously, the problem is one in Westminster, not having enough members of Parliament to get behind a deal. At the moment, we've got 313 members of Parliament. 90% of them have supported the Prime Minister's deal. So we're in the best place to deliver
But I guess
Brexit.
the other way of looking at that is Theresa May's utter failure to reach out to other parties soon enough, recognising that she has a minority administration and trying to work with others. Isn't that the main failure here that we've seen?
Well, she's been in a very difficult situation because, yes, the biggest party, but it is a minority government. All I can say is we are determined to deliver Brexit. It's a very clear majority. The majority for leaving was 9 times greater than that for creating the National Assembly for Wales back in 1997. And it's very clear to us that we have to deliver this. If we don't, there will be a massive breakdown of faith in politics. And we're the only party that can actually deliver this. If it's a shortage of MPs that is
Can you deliver it, though? I mean,
if it's
from everything we're seeing in Westminster at the moment, you haven't got a hope in hell of delivering it. You can't get it through the MPs.
If we haven't, then no one else has, for the very simple reason.
Is that as good as it gets? If we can't do it, nobody else can?
Well, I know it does get better than that, because we are very determined to deliver it. Obviously, it is an incredibly difficult issue, and in a context where you don't have a majority, it's an uphill battle, but we will get there. And in getting there, we're the best placed party to get there because we have the largest number of MPs. And at the end of the day, there is a sense in which this election is a bit of a sideshow, in the sense that it's not going to break the impasse in Parliament. The problem is in Westminster. The significance of this election really is whether it sustains the momentum for the parties that can deliver Brexit, or whether it actually gives it to other parties that want a second referendum, which I think would be fatal. We'll
get onto that in a minute. Jackie Jones for Labour. I mean, to get any sort of deal through Parliament, the Conservatives will be relying and will need the Labour Party. We've got viewers at home watching this programme now who want to remain in the European Union. Should they vote for Labour?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because all 4 candidates have come out in favour of
against your party policy?
Not at all. It's in line with party policy. And as you know, we've been negotiating with the Conservative Party to no avail. And as far as I can see, I'm not in the room, but as far as I can see, there's absolutely no movement at all in Theresa May's deal. So in that scenario, then we'll move forward to the second part.
But Jeremy Corbyn says, as Democratic Socialists, we can't ignore that Brexit vote.
I would never dream of ignoring it.
Another referendum for you is Plan C, isn't it? Plan A is get a deal, which you'll be continuing tomorrow. Plan B is go for an election. Plan C is another vote. That's not a Remain party, is it?
Well, I can speak for myself as a candidate. As a trade unionist, I was a trade unionist for 15 years. We negotiated with management many, many times, and we went into those negotiations in good faith. Sometimes we got a good deal for members, sometimes we didn't. But we would always go back to the members and ask them if they wanted to accept it. And that is our position, all 4 candidates in Wales.
But are you acting in good faith as candidates by adopting a position which is quite clearly at odds with your party's European manifesto?
I think it's absolutely democratic that we go back and ask both Leave and Remainers
That wasn't my question.
Move
that wasn't my
forward.
question. Isn't it going against what you've got in your own
No,
party's
not at
manifesto?
all, because it is, and Jeremy Corbyn has himself said, and Mark Drakeford as well, have said that there is the option of going for a confirmatory vote, or I would say a final say. It's only democratic.
John Owen Jones from Change UK, I can see you shaking your head there, as a former Labour man yourself, of course. What you're going for is, out and out, we do want another referendum.
Well,
why do you want to ignore that vote of nearly 3 years ago?
As a former candidate, I can tell Jackie that when you stand for election, you stand on your manifesto. And if you're saying something else, you're either lying to yourself or you're lying to the people. Now, I've been in a pro-European party for all my adult life, nearly 50 years, and that was the Labour Party. But it isn't a pro-European party now. And I was appointed by John Smith, a great Labour leader, a great European positive Labour leader, and he appointed me to the Whip's office to deal with the Maastricht Treaty when we signed up to the single market 25 years ago. And the Tory party at the time had a problem with a small number, or dozen or so, I think John Major called them the bastards, didn't he? They were John Redwood and Ian Duncan Smith and Bill Cash. And we had a tiny problem with a tiny fringe. And that was Jeremy Corbyn
Let's forget the history lesson for a moment and concentrate on what we want to talk about, what we're here to talk about.
I'll answer your question. You're asking me where do we stand, and I'm explaining to you...
No, I'm asking you why you're ignoring the view of the 17 million people who voted to leave the European Union.
16.8 million people said something else, and the reason is because I'm staying in principle to what I've always believed.
To the minority who wanted to remain?
It was a minority in an election which were people were promised an ideal leaving of the European Union, which was never deliverable. Now they have a clear view, or they should have a clear view, of how difficult that leaving of the European Union is, and they should be allowed to vote again. Nathan
Gill, I guess you were the... Of all our panel members here, you were most prominent as that Leave campaign in 2016. It was undeliverable. It was always going to be undeliverable because you had 17 million voters, all of whom, I guess, had a pretty different idea of what Brexit would look like.
It was undeliverable with a Remainer Prime Minister, and we've proven that. So what we need somebody who actually believes in what they are doing.
But it was undeliverable anyway, regardless of the Prime Minister, wasn't it?
No, nonsense. You say people didn't know what they were voting for. That is the biggest... way of condescending the electorate I've ever heard. To say...
I didn't say they didn't know what they were voting for.
That is the biggest argument that I hear, that people were too thick to understand.
Let's stick to the discussion we're having in this room now.
No, you
it was
said
undeliverable, full stop, wasn't it?
No, you said that people had different ideas of what... All it said on the ballot paper was leave. It didn't say leave closely aligned to the EU. It didn't say stay in the single market, because actually the Prime Minister used £9 million of our money sending out a booklet telling us exactly what leave would look like. And it said after 2 years we'd be trading on WTO if we hadn't struck a deal. After 2 years, we now find ourselves extended.
They didn't say we'd go to WTO after 2 years.
The Prime Minister said that.
That wasn't on the leaflet that was said. It wasn't on the leaflet that they sent out.
You can see the Prime Minister saying that.
I just wonder, when you're talking about a Prime Minister who is a Remain Prime Minister, that's democracy. The UK has a Prime Minister who was a Remainer. You're all about democracy. Why are you going against what Parliament wants and trying to push your own sort of version of what leave should look like?
Because this actually is the one instance where it is not about the will of Parliament, should I say the will not of Parliament, it's about the will of the people. And we were told, you tell the politicians, you tell us, and we will deliver what you tell us. 3 years later, it's an absolute outrage that myself and Jill Evans are sat here being, putting ourselves forward for re-election to a Parliament that we should not even be a member of. And that's what's making people angry. That's why people are flocking to the Brexit Party, because they want their voice to be heard And this is an opportunity for them to make their voice heard once again.
Jill Evans, he has a point there. It should have been delivered by now. You shouldn't be sitting here seeking re-election. And yet you want to continue as part of the European Union. I guess it's the same question to all the Remain parties. Why do you want to ignore that referendum of 2.5, 3 years ago?
Because in 3 years, what we've seen is politicians in Westminster going round and round in circles. There is clearly no way out of this. Westminster is failing yet again. We've seen this for decades in Wales, but we see it much more clearly now. It's not just Wales, it's the whole of the UK.
Leave without a deal.
There's no way out other than to take the democratic path, which is to go back to the people and ask the people to decide again.
Or leave with no deal.
WTO.
We want to stay within the European Union, and I belong to Plaid Cymru, the Party of Wales. Our raison d'etre, our whole reason for being, is to improve the lives of people in Wales, to look after the Welsh interests. There is no way that leaving the European Union will do that. It will only cause damage to Wales. And therefore, my priority is to remain in the European Union, and I will keep on carrying on campaigning for that.
But doesn't it damage the people of Wales that you ignore what they voted, how they voted in 2016?
But I get lots of people contacting me to say that they're unsure or that they changed their minds by now. It's 3 years. We hadn't had a proper debate before the referendum. We have been having that debate now. We haven't had a full debate still on the options, and that's why people should now look back and think and have the choice again, the choice of remaining in the European Union or
But Jill,
I want everyone to have a chat. Before we have a discussion, I want everyone to have a chat.
If a deal ever comes out of Westminster.
And the same point to you, I guess, Sam Bennett, is that Liberal Democrats, there's an irony here that the Liberal Democrats surely are going against the democratic will of the people of the United Kingdom.
Absolutely not. We've been quite consistent. The party has always been a pro-European party. That's the manifesto.
Even when the people of the United Kingdom vote to leave the EU?
But the whole premise of a democracy is that firstly, that we can have a clear, open and honest debate about where we're going, and that clearly wasn't the case in 2016. The Leave campaign peddled so many lies. And the second part of that is the ability for people to change their mind. And it's clear from the polling that people have changed their mind, so people deserve another opportunity to see where they want to go.
Kris Hicks, UKIP its entire purpose has been for leaving the European Union. And yet, now that it's happening, it seems that UKIP is becoming largely irrelevant. How has that happened?
Well, I would disagree that the party has become irrelevant. I mean, we have a full kind of domestic vision for Brexit, not just now, but we actually have a vision for how to get out of the European Union, and also a vision for the United Kingdom post-Brexit as well. So I don't see how, you could say that we've become irrelevant.
Because you've just lost 80% of your councillors in England last week.
Well, it was a very difficult campaign, bear in mind, but we would have had no councillors had Gerard Batten not stepped in February 2018 to actually save the party.
Well, that's not a reflection of a healthy party, is it then?
Well, we could have had, a lot more time, I think, to prepare for these elections, but of course we are the original party of Brexit. We fought very hard to achieve it. And we are going forward with our membership. We went from, a low of 17,000 up to 30,000 and above at this point. We are rebuilding. And again, we've come together and we will be sending out leaflets to all 27 million households throughout the United Kingdom, putting forward the UKIP message of leaving unilaterally.
Unilaterally, so you're saying, again, same as the Brexit Party, really, no deal, WTO terms, we're just going to leave come what may?
We're just going to, well, yeah, absolutely, because, that is what it said on the ballot. They were quite right. It said, do you want to leave or do you want to remain? The people chose to leave, and quite frankly, I despair that we're here today. We shouldn't be here today. We shouldn't be facing a European Parliament election. We should already leave. And what I'm seeing on the doorstep, really, is that kind of level of despair. And I think the real enemy of politics right now will be the political apathy, the feeling that the politicians have totally let down the people, and they're just simply not listening. So, if you're a leaver, I would say, obviously, vote for UKIP on May the 23rd. Possibly if you're a Remainer, well, you don't really know where Labour or the Tories stand, so you might be better off with, the Liberal Democrats or the other Remain parties.
I'm sure the Greens will be very pleased to get your endorsement there. And to sort of, Kris here is talking about that element of people turning their backs and being so disappointed with democracy. Is that something you're picking up on the doorstep as well?
Yes, but for different reasons. Partly because it's undeliverable. What was promised isn't achievable. Westminster have proven that. I don't care who's Prime Minister, they couldn't get this through. And for people sat around here saying they're angry that they're here, you don't have to be here. You don't have to stand. And I'd also like to say, in the words of a famous Brexiteer, a democracy that isn't capable of changing its mind isn't a democracy. There's a lot gone on in the last 3 years. People are very clear that what was offered isn't deliverable. People are angry that they were lied to. And I think we're seeing increasing support on the doorstep for a second vote. People are realising it's the only way this can be resolved. Westminster can't sort it. And as the strongest Remain party in the European Parliament, we fully support the calls for a second referendum.
If I may come in on that, I mean, the idea of a democracy changing its mind, but, you know, in the first instance, when that decision is made, it's actually implemented. You know, I've never seen such a large decision, a historical decision in this country or any other country, where it was just, you know, simply denied.
It was an advisory vote.
Well, we keep saying this, but I mean, the Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, he said, look, this is your last chance. There won't be any equivocation. Think very carefully when you went in there. So the government made it very clear that it was the absolute...
But also, didn't an overwhelming majority of MPs back implementing Article 50, which would have led to the UK leaving the EU on the 29th of March?
They did. Our MP didn't. I was surprised to see that some of the Change UK MPs did vote to trigger Article 50. I think there was a lot... It was that whole atmosphere of misinformation. People just charged into this blindly, not knowing...
MPs charged into it blindly?
Quite a few of them, I'd say, yes.
The notion that this is undeliverable, I think, is nonsense. This all boils down to the fact that there is a government
Theresa May might disagree with that.
Your party think it's undeliverable.
Without a working majority.
Let's be clear, they can't even agree amongst themselves what they want.
Well, if you look historically, 1997, Tony Blair had a majority of 180. He had a majority of 170 in 2001. We're looking at a situation of a minority government. The idea that it's undeliverable is just nonsense. It's just that we have a minority government.
But why hasn't Theresa May been able to deliver it?
It's perfectly deliverable. Well, having a minority government is very difficult. It's very challenging. But the point I'm making is it's not... some people have made comments here sort of to suggest that you just can't do it. What I'm saying is that we're in a very unusual situation where we have a minority government. If we had a majority government, it would have been easily deliverable.
It's because the vast majority of MPs do not want us to leave. That's the be-all and end-all of it.
Let's
if they wanted us to leave, we would have left.
I want to take it back another point
then.
Tell me what the Conservative vision of Brexit will be and guarantee me now that it will be delivered.
Well, obviously, the negotiations are going on, so I can't tell you exactly.
And here we are, 11 days
is.
away from the election, and you can't tell me what the governing party's position will be.
Well, it is on the basis of the Prime Minister's deal.
On the basis of?
That has been voted on, and obviously each time it's been voted for, the majority for it has, or the number of people voting for it has gone up and up and up. 90% of Conservative MPs have voted for it. If 100% of MPs, Conservative MPs had voted for it with the DUP, then it would have gone over the line.
So it's entirely
possible
Doesn't
to
all
deliver.
of this just show that the only way forward is to go back to the people?
Well, I imagine Nathan Gill would say it shows that we should just leave.
If the democratic parliament of the UK cannot reach a decision and has rejected Theresa May's deal time after time, we should go back to the people and ask the people which is the way forward.
You stood in the European Parliament and you demanded that the Catalonian referendum be respected, which was actually an illegal referendum. And now here we are, we're hearing you saying that a legal referendum in which the vast majority of the people in Britain voted, if it had been constituencies, it would have been the biggest government in history. And you don't want that to be... Why are the Catalonians so much better than the Welsh?
We've had more than one
Why is that the case?
We've had more than one referendum on issues in the past. This is a momentous decision that we are making on our future.
The devolution
and I can't see why any Democrats would argue against giving people...
One second. John Owen Jones, I want to bring John Jones.
a word in, please. Yeah. The contradiction in your position is that when the referendum was held, you campaigned for parliamentary sovereignty. You campaigned against the European Union being able to overwhelm parliamentary sovereignty. And this country is run as a parliamentary democracy. So it's up to Parliament to decide what to do. And it's no good saying that the governing party doesn't have a majority. Why doesn't the governing party have a majority? Because insufficient people elected it.
But 80% of the parties that stood, 80% of the people who stood in the election in 2017 stood on the basis of delivering.
Yeah, and you elect,
didn't they?
Sorry, if I may come in on that. I mean, the whole reason that we had a referendum in the first place was because Parliament couldn't agree on our future relationship with the European Union. So sovereignty...
Let's not talk over each other.
Absolutely not true. So the reason we have a referendum in the first place...
Let Kris Hicks finish and then we'll come to you.
The whole point of the referendum was that we took sovereignty from Parliament because they could not agree, and we gave it to the people. The people gave them that instruction and they should implement that. And it's an absolute disgrace that we're sitting here today still inside the European Union.
Dash, because the reason we had a referendum was because Cameron needed to unite his party, whose party was enormously divided. He anticipated that he wouldn't get a majority in the forthcoming election, and therefore he wouldn't have to deliver that referendum, and he made several miscalculations, but it wasn't about anything else.
I'm a big fan of history, but I want to look at ahead rather than looking back all the time, which we're a little bit in danger of doing. Jackie Jones, tell me what the guaranteed policy of the Labour Party will be now going into this.
Well, we launched our manifesto just this week, as you saw, and there were quite a lot of policies within that, and they gel very well with the manifestos of the Democratic and Socialist Party in Europe, so our sister party that we are part of. So absolute action on climate change. We've called a climate emergency in Wales. We need a global action as well as European Union action. We can do that better at European level. A youth plan. We want further workers' rights, union rights, and we want a fair deal for Wales. So those are some of the highlights.
How do you get a fair deal for Wales if you return to the European Union now, as you want to do?
Because we're a net, we get more money in than we do, than we contribute.
Begging bowl nation.
No, not at all.
Wales.
No,
it's
a fair deal. We've had 10 years of austerity now.
We're so much better than that.
And we've had our services decimated because of 10 years of austerity.
So
therefore we need...
I'll come to you in a moment. Just let Jackie Jones finish.
Unfortunately, we're in a situation where the Tories have, and the Liberal Democrats have decimated our services because of 10 years of austerity measures.
We have a Welsh government in Cardiff Bay. Why are you blaming the Tories when we have a Welsh government in Cardiff Bay?
Because they have not given us the money that we were supposed to have.
Why not make a pledge that the £39 billion which would be saved from leaving the EU wouldn't be passed on to Wales? Why not make that pledge instead?
There's no guarantee that it will be. Where's the guarantee? I mean, we don't even know who's going to be next Prime Minister. What is it going to be a Brexiteer? Who is it going to be? How are we going to guarantee workers' rights for the people of Wales if we don't even know who's coming next? It's impossible.
If the people vote in a referendum by a clear majority, 9 times greater than the majority to create the National Assembly for Wales, no one called for a referendum in that instance, then we have to move forward to implement that decision. And obviously the tier of government will change, but just because you don't know exactly what's going to happen, that does not a reason for not doing it. The problem if you don't do that is that you completely break faith in politics. This would be catastrophic.
Let's just concentrate on that. I want to concentrate on that for 1 minute, because money was an important issue during the referendum campaign, and there was research which was suggesting that Wales was a net beneficiary to the tune of around £250 million a year. And what the Conservatives have done since then is say, well, there'll be a shared prosperity fund, so the money will be shared out. Can you promise on this programme now that Wales won't be any worse off under that plan for a shared prosperity fund?
Well, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund details haven't been worked out yet because Brexit has not yet been delivered. So I can't tell you exactly how much it will be, but obviously as a Welsh parliamentarian, I would be working hard to make sure we got every bit as much. But you'll be asking us to... It's a leap in the dark then, isn't it?
Yes.
I think it's very important to remember that we've been getting EU funds for a long time, and there's been lots of reflection about the fact of concern that we've been getting them for such a long time and not actually breaking out and developing our economy using that money.
Actually,
the money needs to be better spent. It's not just a matter of having more money, as Nathan said.
And that's an important point, isn't it? I mean, during the referendum campaign, I was in Swansea, I was in Blaenau Gwent, talking to people saying, but you've had all this money. And they say, well, I still haven't got a job, though, and we're still no better off. It wasn't used well, was it?
No, people were sending a message in the referendum. No, it wasn't just about money. And it was about dissatisfaction and people who were living in poorer communities. Now, the money wasn't a factor then, But after this election, I hope I will still be in the European Parliament. The UK and Wales will still be in the EU. And so I will be using that opportunity to go forward with much more ambitious plans for Wales. A transformation fund for our economies, double the amount of money that's come in, and have a radical government in Wales that can spend it effectively.
Or in your election pledges, you talk about leading the call for a £5 billion EU transformational fund for Wales. How are you going to do that? I mean, what kind of leverage does Wales and the UK now have if we return to the EU with our tails between our legs saying we tried to leave but it didn't work? Why should they give us anything?
It depends on having a strong, ambitious government in Wales that will go there and not just accept second best, but say we want equality with other nations, we want to transform our economy in all parts of the country, we want to support all sectors of the economy, and we've got ambitious plans to do that. And in my experience, the European Union has always been willing to support poorest areas and to support economic plans and to support ambition, because this would create jobs. We want a Green New Deal.
But you also talk about a Welsh migration system, creating a Welsh migration advisory service to introduce a system that works for the needs of Wales. If you want to stay in the European Union, you accept free movement of labour, free movement of travel. How can you introduce a migration system solely for Wales and have freedom of movement?
That's not about freedom of movement. That's about the migration system, which, as currently is outside the EU. That doesn't affect freedom of movement. While we are still in the EU, then everyone has freedom of movement. This is about a different system, rather than us having to adapt to the UK system as it is at the moment, which doesn't serve the needs of Wales. We should devolve those issues, as we should devolve many other issues.
So it's nothing to do with Europe?
So we can develop policies that suit Wales.
So that idea of a migration system, you're saying, is nothing to do with the EU?
It's not as we are in the EU still, because then there's freedom of movement.
Sorry, this is your campaign pledge for the European elections, and you're saying it's nothing to do with the EU and European matters?
Well, it doesn't affect freedom of movement. What it does affect is the ability of Wales to attract workers to the health service, to all other sectors, and to welcome people to Wales. We want people to come. We want people to come here. We want people to help build up our economy, both from other EU states
We're desperate for doctors.
Beyond.
How are you going to keep them in Wales?
By building a strong economy and building a successful nation.
OK, well, that's pretty easy,
Kris Hicks,
isn't
that
it?
element of immigration was a big factor, I guess, during the referendum debate. Since then, it seems to me that UKIP have switched far more to concentrate on immigration matters, bringing in the likes of Tommy Robinson as an advisor to the party.
Well, not to the party leader, just to be exact.
To the party leader who leads the party. Well, I mean, that's semantics at play there, but fine. Has that been a wise decision? And what do you think that's done? And has that been partly responsible, do you think, about the decline in support for you?
No, I don't think there has anything really to do with that. I think, obviously, we've been hit by this European election. Of course, we've had a former leader start another political party, which, of course, is led by that former leader who advocated a second referendum, of course, in February 2018. So, you know, I found it quite interesting that, you know, Mr Gill was taking it up with the other panel member about the promise of a second referendum. No, I think really, you know, in February 2018, UKIP was looking like it was going to go away. We managed to save the party. We looked for other avenues, I think, as well, to try and build it up. We've engaged with...
The far right? Yeah.
No, I completely dispute that, and I think it's disgraceful that term is now bandied about by so many people. I've worked with so many decent, honourable people for over 10 years in this party, and I've seen them their names being dragged through mud for no good reason whatsoever. And I think it's very dangerous that both the media and, you know, our political opponents are easily using this term when they should be using it for the real far right, quite frankly.
Isn't it because your leader's associating with the far right? That's exactly why we're pointing it out, because it's clear to everyone else that you're associated with the far right.
I don't like this term far right. I think it's very dangerous.
You don't have to like it, it's true.
No.
It is very dangerous, which is why you shouldn't be flirting with it.
No. You should not be mislabelling decent people who fought for the independence of this country for 25 years. Well, you know, he is a far from perfect individual, but what happens when... But what happens when you have a political establishment which does not want to take on certain particular issues? Sometimes people
Hate
come out...
crime is on the rise because of this.
Can I finish? People come out to the wilderness. And that is what has happened, effectively, in that regard. Obviously, he is running his own campaign. He probably won't have anything to do with UKIP further on, and I think it's an historical matter at this point.
Anthony Slaughter, isn't there a point here about immigration that it was an issue during the campaign, and yet by seeking to remain in the European Union, you're sort of just brushing it under the table? As Kris Hicks was saying, that people aren't willing to take on the issue.
It was used as an issue quite disgracefully by some parties. And I think what was unfortunate was our major parties were scared of that and they pandered to it, which is why we've seen an increase of far-right activity on the streets. And I will use the word far-right because that is what these people are. The Green Party completely support freedom of movement. We think immigrants are good for this country. We welcome them. We do not diminish anyone. Human rights are inalienable. They're not something that's in our power to give or take away. We need to be an open country, welcoming to the world and working with the world. Shutting ourselves in this little insular world of nostalgia for a Britain that never was isn't going to get us anywhere.
Isn't that ignoring genuinely held concerns that a lot of people around the United Kingdom might have?
People have concerns, but when you talk to them on the doorstep and they start to talk about immigration and you dig a bit deeper, they're talking about housing, they're talking about health, they're talking about infrastructure. And you have these conversations with people and they realise it's not the fault of the Polish guy around the corner. It's not the fault of the people down the street. It is the fault of the government at Westminster and in Cardiff. So yes, people have those concerns, but the way to deal with that is to talk to people.
John Owen Jones, I just wonder, with this element of just going back, remaining in the European Union, let's just accept for a second that you succeed. What kind of a relationship then in future should the United Kingdom have with the European Union?
Well, European Union's main task is to develop the economy of all countries in the European Union, but that's not its only task. And that's historically not... I know you hate history, but it's not historically...
Oh, I like
its
history.
It's main task. And I'm reminded of... the European Union was set up in order to stop warfare in Europe. And people say, oh, that's a long, long time ago. Well, 20 years ago, I was in Bosnia supervising the elections that were held there. Bosnia, part of Yugoslavia. And there was a dreadful genocidal war there. And European armies helped to stop that war. And if I can take you back just a fortnight ago, a poor young woman was shot dead on the streets of Northern Ireland. And that is connected to the European Union because we would never, ever have got the peace treaty signed on the Good Friday Agreement if it were not for the fact that North and South were both part of the European movement. So that's not an unimportant issue.
And I imagine that everyone around this table will agree that peace in our time is something which should be fought for. But the question was about what kind of relationship will we have with the European Union in terms of the democratic institutions, in terms of economic relationship. What do you foresee if you remain?
There's a lot wrong with the European Union. No organisation is perfect. But the world isn't getting much safer. And there's a huge trading bloc called China, and there's a very aggressive leader of our ally, United States. And I can't see Britain alone being in a better position to deal with the competition that comes from those places. But Britain united with our comrades, our fellow... Oh, there was a slip, wasn't there? Our comrades across Europe is in a much stronger position.
So full subservience is what you're saying?
No,
basically. Yes,
I'm saying cooperation.
No, if we remain in the
difference.
EU... It is not about cooperation, it's about full subservience. It's about accepting all the things that we have warned about in the referendum
You're a member
campaign.
You're a member of the Parliament. Is your vote any less than a German or a French person? Your vote counts exactly in the same way.
Is a rubber stamping, thin veneer of democracy within.
The difficulty with this conversation, I think.
Let's Dan Rocher and then Jill Evans.
If I may, is people are going to be watching this at home. I've been listening to you basically rehearsing arguments for the referendum, for why we should stay in.
We won.
And it's extraordinary
Well, 'cause I
on the
want another
doorstep.
referendum, that's why.
The number of people that I talk to
Then you'll lose
who
it
are just
again.
absolutely gobsmacked that Parliament hasn't honoured the decision yet. And interestingly,
It's up
the
to the
number of people who said they voted Remain, but they believe very much in democracy and it's only right and proper that the referendum should be honoured. And that's what we need to get on and do.
So Jill Evans wanted to come in next, and then we'll
if we look at one of the biggest issues that faces us today, but also one of the biggest issues on the agenda, which is climate change. Exactly. The European Union has led the way on fighting climate change, which culminated in the Paris Agreement, which is the first legally binding global agreement to combat climate change. Now, that doesn't go far enough, of course, we know that. And we see young people accusing us of not doing enough, saying, come on, you've got to stop this. This is our future at stake. We can't do that outside the European Union. We have to work together with countries across Europe on climate change.
You can still work together on climate change outside the European Union.
I don't believe that it would be half as effective for us to be, as the UK, outside the European Union working on climate change. The EU has driven the member state countries to act on climate change. It's one of the biggest...
Sam Bennett, you wanted to come in earlier?
Then hadn't you?
Well, it's evident that people have changed their mind. All the polls in the last 6 months have shown that Remain is ahead. And if you look at the council elections, all the Leave parties collapsed. What did you have is the Remain parties doing well and the Liberal Democrats sweeping up the board. That is evidence that people have changed their mind and they want another referendum.
The Brexit Party wasn't on the ballot paper.
But why is anyone afraid of another referendum? If people are so confident that nothing has changed, then let's have the debate and let's give people another vote. There's a huge demand for a second vote.
Politics depends upon, and it won't work without it, and that is faith in politics.
Yeah.
And if a majority of people voted to leave the European Union and they feel that the elites basically said, we think you got the wrong decision, we're not going to implement it, then that would be an absolute crisis.
No, absolutely.
And I hear Jill's arguments, but these are arguments that you should have made more powerfully in the run-up to the 23rd of June 2016.
People have got no faith now.
Kris Hicks,
and we need to give them the power to make the decision.
Yeah, if I may, look, we had a referendum, the decision was made. I mean, what gives anyone any idea that if we had a second referendum, that it would actually be implemented the second time round? You know, what is this, best of 2, best of 3, best of 4? How long does this go on for? I know it's called democracy, but once you make a democratic decision, you implement that decision in the first place.
UKIP wants to abolish the Assembly. And we've had
No. We've changed our policy. We said
again.
No, we want to advocate a policy of having a referendum.
Another referendum.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we want to give the question to the people. We've had 25 years of the Welsh Assembly. Almost, they will be at the point of that proposed referendum.
So it's okay to do it on the Assembly, but not on the EU?
Because no. This is within a generation, and I think when you have an institution that has existed for a generation,
but there was another referendum in 2011, wasn't there? There was another referendum in 2011 which gave it more powers.
It didn't actually ask the question of whether you'd like to get rid of the referendum.
It would be very interesting if that referendum had asked the question, should we continue to have the Assembly, what the outcome would have been.
Well,
I want to bring Anthony Saucer in.
I can only imagine what this looks like to people out there, this quibbling, finger-pointing. And Jill raised climate change. It is the big issue. We are living in a climate crisis. School kids, young people are angry. You saw Extinction Rebellion bring the streets of London to a halt. The UK already doesn't meet its targets under European law. The UK Green Party would not trust the UK Tory government in this country to deliver the environmental protection we need. Jill's absolutely right. It's by international cooperation in organisations such as the EU and the UN that we tackle this. We cannot ignore it. And this quibbling over you said, he said, she said...
But surely if the UK is already not meeting its obligations under EU law, what's the point of remaining in the EU?
Well, we have to meet those obligations. The UK government will be held to account. And we need even stronger legislation.
And if it's on an international UN level, well, doesn't that bypass the EU?
No, it's institutions working together. And we have to remember things like climate change, air pollution. They don't respect borders. They're not single nation issues.
If I may, though, I mean, obviously the Green Party's got this policy of protecting the environment, but of course you've also said that you have the position of kind of supporting, you know, mass immigration. You say immigration is good. Well, what's the upper limit? I mean, what are the actual carbon effects of 250 to 300,000 people, you know, coming into the country?
Climate change.
Well, this is true, isn't
climate
it? I mean,
change.
Mass immigration has an effect on the climate.
Climate change. Climate change is the biggest driver of migration.
Yes.
People are fleeing awful conditions that they didn't cause.
Absolutely.
We in the developed world caused that. We have a debt to those people. We're the people who are trashing the planet.
Well, now, Jackie Jones, what would you change in the EU if you've managed to remain as a member?
Well, I've spent 30 years teaching and researching on European law, and I'm in favour of much closer ties to the people of Europe. So action on, of course, climate change we've already talked about, and that's absolutely fundamental. And the polluter pays principle from the 80s is a fantastic principle which needs to go further, in my view. We also need some more action on equality and diversity, most definitely. Women's rights, of course, and as well as workers' rights. We need to get better protections for workers in all workplaces.
Because isn't one of the problems with the EU, and I think David Cameron saw it when he went to Brussels in 2016 and came back with a sort of a deal and said he'd managed to change people's view, that it is a very inflexible organisation. You might say, I want to change X, Y and Z.
Yeah.
They'll say, no.
I haven't found that. I've worked with many institutions already. I was president of European Women Lawyers Association. We did an awful lot of work around women's rights, and you can see the European Union evolving its policies around women's rights, LGBT rights, and other rights as well. Now, the referendum did one thing. People went into it in very good faith, believing some of the rhetoric that was around that referendum. But we've seen that that hasn't come to pass. But the European Union also saw what is happening in the UK, and it also is open for change. And our manifesto that we're standing on is one of a new social contract with the European Union.
But,
and I think that's deliverable.
But it is also one of trying to get a Brexit deal. And Barry Gardiner this morning, speaking on Sky News, is saying...
you asked me whether if we remain.
Is it disappointing for you then that Labour doesn't seem to be coalescing around this idea of remaining, that there's still such a big split within the party?
Now, as I said earlier about being a trade unionist, I understand that we need to be able to negotiate on good faith terms. But if we can't get those guarantees, and it doesn't look likely, then we have to move forward, because there will be a Brexit plus one day. And we are trying to bring the country together.
Nathan Gill, just one of the arguments you've been saying now about wanting to leave without a deal, reversing to the WTO deals. We were together in Brussels. I interviewed you a week before the referendum, and you said back then, of course there'll be a deal. German car manufacturers will make sure that Germany ensures there is a deal. Now you're saying, no, there shouldn't be a deal.
No. Now
Why
I'm
the change of plan?
saying that the only option open to us now, after 3 years of the worst Prime Minister in history and her cohort of amateur negotiators, the only option available to us now is WTO.
You said German car industry.
That's because our idiot
allow
Parliament took no deal off the table. Because if you take off the only cards you've got to get that trade deal, why would the German car industry now say, oh, give us a deal, when our idiots in Westminster have actually taken that off the table? So that is the issue. I'm sorry.
But on WTO
Theresa
terms...
May's deal is actually not her deal, it's Michel Barnier's deal, and it's a treaty. And it's a treaty that will bind us into the EU.
Let's talk about what you want to see happening first. We'll come to that in a moment. But just to dwell on your idea of WTO, which the UK government is saying, for example, would mean £1,500 on the cost of a car because of additional tariffs and so on. You're portraying WTO. You're portraying WTO as a sort of a panacea which can solve everything.
It's absolute nonsense.
It would raise a lot of problems, wouldn't it?
It's Remainers within the government giving a one-sided...
But there would be tariffs. There would be tariffs.
The Remainers within the British government...
40% on Welsh land.
They've been published.
The Remainers within the bureaucrats within the British government said that only one nation would go into recession if we went on WTO in Europe, and it would be Britain. What a load of nonsense. The repercussions of that would affect everybody, not just Britain. WTO allows us to set our own tariffs. It's got a maximum,
as long as you
but we can set it
reciprocate.
at zero if we wish.
Why would you do that?
Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we? What you mean, to better the people, to make sure that people can afford cars?
So if you set it at zero, the whole country will be flooded with cheap goods from China, from India, from all over the world, decimating manufacturing and agriculture.
Well,
probably.
no, absolutely not.
If you set tariffs to zero, of course.
But you can still control how much comes in. You still allow how many cars come in.
But that's not how the WTO works at all.
No.
Listen, the WTO is a starting position for us. 24 nations trade with Britain right now just under WTO, and that's according to the European Commission's
which are those?
own
Which is the biggest
website.
one of those? How big are those?
I knew that you was going to ask me this, so I've got it on my phone.
Well,
so,
while you check your phone
States of
for the
America,
answer.
United Arab
Oh my
Emirates,
God.
Venezuela, Russia, Saudi Arabia.
So you want to be like Venezuela?
Loads.
No, thank you.
Australia. Yeah, I want to be like Australia. I want to be like America.
We
You want to be like
But you're saying that's a
according
starting position.
to-
So where do you
yes.
develop to from there?
Absolutely, we developed a trade deals, which is where Liam Fox and the British
Really?
government right now has absolutely let us down. He should have lined up right now the 53 countries that have asked us for trade deals. It should be there ready for the ink to be signed. We've been let down by this government. That's why the Brexit Party had to be set up. That's why we're here, because
tell that
people
to
are
the Welsh
furious.
It has been a failure of a Conservative government, hasn't it?
furious.
The government didn't take WT off the table. That was Parliament very recently, actually, just at the end of March. Liam Fox has been working very, very hard to get everything ready so that when we leave, he can capitalise on all the trade benefits. He's one of the greatest advocates in this country for this. Obviously, he was a campaigner for Brexit, and he fully understands the benefits of Brexit in terms of negotiating
Liam
those
Fox,
trade deals.
who said it would be the easiest deal in history.
The easiest deal in history. He has worked tirelessly to actually develop these traders, and he's absolutely committed to them. He's fully seized of the importance of them, and
good for him.
it is one of the main arguments of Brexit. I mean, he campaigned for Brexit, as I did. Being able to negotiate our own trade deals.
We are the
as
fifth largest economy in the world. Why shouldn't we be able to go out there and strike deal with other countries?
It isn't very easy. You do have to think about all of those different... Look, we've been in the European Union for 40-odd years, and we've integrated so many rules and procedures. It's very difficult. You can't just from one day to the next,
But why do you want to live in a country where it just does things that are easy?
From all of those rules.
Do things that are right.
They're common standards. They're common standards that we've negotiated over a long period of time, and they're good standards. We don't want chlorinated chicken in this country. I do not want to have any kind of trade deal that forces us into that. It's an absolute disaster for white
farmers.
farmers.
Why would we be forced into that? This discussion
Because
is
that's
bizarre.
what the US administration would do.
If we have the EU there, we ourselves aren't there to have our own governance principles in place.
Exactly.
We are there, we are the government, and we will be able to negotiate our own. This whole idea of it was easier, I'm not particularly interested in trying to find out what's the easiest thing to do. I want to do things
businesses probably are,
right
though.
for our country.
Businesses who import and export
probably 8% of UK
We were
is
promised
done there.
100 trade deals in the first 100 days.
Well, we haven't had Brexit, have we?
Well, yeah, but we need the deals before we leave. Otherwise, what are we going to? How are we going to trade? Oh, that's ridiculous.
You cannot do deals until you.
Hang on, no, I just want to let's just let Dan Boucher, and then I'll come to you finally.
Yeah, I would say you cannot get deals until you've left. We haven't left, and that is obviously the tragedy. We come back to the fundamental reality here, which is the only party in Parliament that is trying to deliver Brexit seriously, not looking at second referendum, is the Conservative Party. It's the biggest party. One of the challenges, obviously, that UKIP and the Brexit Party have is they don't have any MPs at all, so they're incapable of delivering Brexit.
Relevance, your point?
The food and drink industry in Wales is worth billions to the economy and helps to sustain rural areas in particular. The vast majority of those exports go to the rest of the European Union. If we don't trade using the same very hard fought for standards on food safety, on food labelling, all those things that I know from the constituents that contact me that they care about, then it's going to be hugely damaging to the Welsh economy. And I think that we need to be concentrating on those issues which really matter to people in their everyday lives. And those are the kind of issues.
There's a lot of talking over each other. There's a lot of talking over each other. So why don't we just now, as we're nearing towards the end of the programme now, we'll just let you all have your say for about a minute or so, one at a time. No cutting across. We'll start over there with Anthony Slaughter.
OK, we've heard a lot of heat and noise. I can assure you that if you vote for the Greens in this European election, you're voting for a party that's committed to remaining in Europe, committed to stopping Brexit, but also tackling the very real issues that led to the Brexit vote. We're a party with a clear vision of our role, the UK's role, Wales's role in Europe. And we're a party, as you all know, with a long, long history of policies for tackling the climate crisis. We're the largest, strongest EU Remain group in the European Parliament. So I'd urge you to vote for us on May the 23rd. You'll be saying yes to Europe, yes to investing in our economies, no to climate crisis. That is our offer.
But is there a danger that actually, especially in Wales, where you've found it very difficult to make those gains, that you'll never be able to get enough support?
We're growing, and we saw incredible election results in the English Council election last week. Since then, we've had members they're joining at 1 every 3 minutes at the moment, and that's been sustained for almost a week now. There's growing support, and the growing awareness of the climate crisis is pointing people towards us because they know we are the party with real policies on that.
John Owen Jones, your turn.
Well, Change UK and I believe that politics in the United Kingdom is broken and that the European Union row is a symptom of that, because we've heard some of it here today. Those on the right want to leave the European Union because they see it's an obstacle for having a red in tooth and claw economy that was able to compete across the whole world by reducing regulation, reducing environmental standards and whatever else in Britain, and not having to abide by rules set in Europe. The far left, which unfortunately are now in control of the Labour Party, want the very opposite. They think the European Union is an obstacle to creating a system in which the state controls most of Britain's economy, in which we don't trade so much. So we see a political system broken and a need for something in the centre to have practical policies, sensible policies, and gets things done rather than argues about various ideologies.
Jackie Jones, your turn.
A vote for all 4 of the Welsh Labour candidates will be a vote for a strong and dedicated team that will attend the European Parliament and work very hard for the workers' rights, for union rights, for everyone who lives in Wales, to try and mitigate the austerity measures that have been decimating our services for 10 years. The Welsh Labour is committed to the Social and Democratic Manifesto, which talks about climate action that we need on a global level and European level. We need a new youth plan. We need rights for workers. We need rights on equality and diversity and a fair deal for Wales. We're all, 4 of us, in favour of having a democratic process of having a final say or the final say. So a vote for all of us would be a vote for that.
Thank you very much. And Kris Hicks.
Well, UKIP is the original party of leave. We've been fighting for over 25 years to leave the European Union. We've fought very hard. We scared David Cameron enough to give us that referendum, and we fought and we won that referendum. UKIP is as committed as it's ever been to getting the UK out of the European Union, and Wales indeed as well. So I would say to the people of Wales, vote for UKIP on May the 23rd and make Brexit happen.
But what about this element of people perhaps turning their backs and UKIP going for the Brexit party? How damaging has that been for you?
Well, I will wait to see what happens on polling day. I'm not looking at the polls. I'm concentrating on campaigning and putting out our positive message. What I would say about the other party is that it does appear to me, in part, to be a mishmash of Kippers, Tories and revolutionary communists. So I'm not sure how confident many leavers in this country would like to see some revolutionary communists in power representing Brexit.
That's another programme. Nathan Gill, your turn.
Wales voted to leave the EU. We've already had that debate. We've had that discussion. We do not need to go there again. The Brexit Party was formed. We are absolutely disgusted at the fact that we are now having to sit in this election again. Westminster has failed us. The politicians have spent 3 years squabbling and trying to deny you of the vote that you had. We are here to remind Westminster. We knew what we were voting for. We voted to leave, and we want them to get on and do the job.
Were people voting for WTO deals, though?
People were voting to leave. They knew exactly what they were voting for. It said it on the ballot paper, to leave the EU. If the government had believed in Brexit, they would have made sure that we had a deal. They had 3 years to do that. The time is up for the government now. WTO is nothing to be feared. Do your own research on it. Don't just take a politician's word for it. Don't listen to the fear-mongering. 24 nations in this planet trade with Britain right now solely on WTO terms. It's nothing for us to fear.
Jill Evans.
I'm proud of my record over the past 20 years being a strong voice for Wales in the European Parliament on issues such as climate change and calling for action on climate change. I was the MEP with the highest score in terms of voting on that. But there's a huge job of work to be done after this election. We are talking about the referendum and what's happening now, but there's huge potential for Wales in Europe, and I want to see us develop that. Plaid Cymru has been consistent and united. We want Wales to stay in the European Union. That is our priority, and we want to do that by giving a final say, a final vote back to the people. And I promise people that if you vote for Plaid Cymru in this election, that is the message you will be sending, and we will be consistent with that. We won't let people down. That is our top priority.
Yeah, thank you. Dan Boucher for the Conservatives.
Well, in this election, I think the big issue is trust. It's about politics and trust, and about not breaking our politics. And we had a very clear referendum result that, as I said, was 9 times greater than the referendum to create the National Assembly for Wales. It's vital that we honour that, and I'm disturbed by the number of people around the table today who are suggesting it would be appropriate to disregard that and have a second referendum. As Conservatives, we're very clear that that's not what we should do. But what I'm also very clear on is that the impasse is in Westminster, and in order to fix it, you need MPs. We have the largest number of MPs. The Brexit party, UKIP, do not have any MPs at all. If you vote for them in this election, you'll get a sort of parallel universe parliament of MEPs in Brussels, but they won't be able to deal with the deadlock in Westminster. If you vote for me as someone who campaigned for Brexit, went into print making the case for Brexit, I will be able to work with colleagues in Westminster, the same party of myself, to campaign for Brexit and to get the deal over the line.
But what kind of deal? Because we just still have no idea what kind of deal you want.
Well, I think it has to be a deal which means leaving the European Union as the single market, the customs union, yeah, and at the end of the day, if it comes to the end of October and no deal has been done, then if it has to be on WTO terms, then so be it. But a deal would be better.
And Sam Bennett.
Well, a vote for the Welsh Liberal Democrats on the 23rd of May is a vote to stop Brexit. We have always been a pro-European party and consistent with that message. And that is reflected in a manifesto that has got policies that are there to tackle the great challenges of our time, whether that's climate change, human trafficking or terrorism. So a vote for the Welsh Liberal Democrats is not only a vote to deal with those issues, but also a vote to stop Brexit. I feel sorry for our Labour Remainer candidate here, who's having to defend a position that she doesn't believe in. And she knows that she's representing a party that is a Leave party.
Isn't that a problem, though? You're saying that you want to be the Remain party, but there are so many over here that you could end up splitting the vote for Remain supporters.
Well, I think what we saw in the council elections in England was the Remain vote swing solidly behind the Liberal Democrats. And we're seeing in all the recent polls, we are third in the UK above the Conservative Party now.
But that's in England.
Let him finish. We'll have a quick chat, but let him finish first.
And as I say, we are third in the UK now on UK polls to show that we are above the Conservatives. So the Remain vote is sitting behind the Liberal Democrats. It's natural home.
I just want to finish.
The only one who can stop
Dan Boucher,
Brexit
I want to pick
party.
up with something you said in your piece there, that you wouldn't want to see a customs union. So any discussion which comes out of the agreement with Labour, which involves a customs union, you wouldn't be for that then?
I would feel uncomfortable about that, but I think it's been construed in terms that say that it would be temporary, so I would presume that would be on the basis that it would be presented as a partial Brexit, needing to go back to the people for a new mandate, a new parliament to deliver the full thing.
So you think that a new parliament, a set of elections?
No, not
At
a
the time
second
of the
referendum at all.
referendum,
It's talked about as temporary until the next election, so that's what I'm guessing. But my preference would clearly be to lose both.
I think the important point is that if people want to vote for Remain in Wales, then Plaid Cymru is the only party totally committed to Remain and to a people's vote that can win seats. And I'm proof of that, and we are hopeful of having a really strong result in this election. But if you want to make a difference, we're the only party that can do that.
And you've had the last word there. Thank you all very much for coming in, because that's all we have time for today. It's flown by, but you can see a full list of all the candidates on our website. That's at bbc.co.uk. bbc.co.uk/Wales Politics. Remember also, Wales Live will be here on BBC One Wales on Wednesday evening after the news at 10, and I'll be back next Sunday at 11 o'clock. So until then, thanks to all my guests. Thank you for watching. Diolch am wylio, a hwyl fawr.